The drill sergeant mocked her in front of the entire base. The commander heard every word. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but the mud still remembered it. Sergeant First Class Daniels stood inches from her face, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, close enough that every recruit behind her could see the tremor she refused to let reach her hands. He wanted her to break. He wanted it on record. What he didn't know was that the man watching from the edge of the formation had heard every single word. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. Private Emily Harmon had grown up being told she was too soft for hard things. Too soft for her father's construction sites. Too soft for the boys who laughed when she signed up for ROTC. Too soft, everyone said, for a uniform. She'd spent 4 years proving them wrong, one blistered mile at a time. She hadn't expected the cruelty to follow her into the army. She hadn't expected it to come from the man whose job was supposed to be building her up. Daniels had a reputation. Recruits whispered about him in the dark after lights out. Not with fear exactly, but with a kind of resigned dread, the way you talk about whether you can't control. He pushed people. That was fine. That was the job. But there was a difference between pushing someone toward strength and pushing someone toward humiliation, and lately, with Harmon, he'd stopped noticing where that line was. That morning, in front of the entire platoon, he'd found it and crossed it without blinking. "You think you belong here?" He'd shouted, flecks of mud and spit hanging in the cold air between them. "Look at you. You cried during the 12-mile ruck. You cried. Somebody get her a tissue and a participation trophy." Laughter rippled through a few recruits near the back. Nervous laughter, the kind that comes from not knowing what else to do. Most of the platoon stayed silent, eyes forward, hearts pounding in secondhand shame. Harmon didn't cry this time. She had promised herself she wouldn't. But her jaw ached from clenching it shut, and somewhere behind her ribs a small, stubborn voice whispered that maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong. She thought about her father's face when she left for basic, proud, but guarded, like he was waiting for her to quit. She thought about how good it would feel to prove him right and just walk away. She was one breath from breaking. She thought no one would ever see her the way she wanted to be seen. She was wrong. Command Sergeant Major Ellis had come out that morning for a routine inspection, nothing more, boots on gravel, clipboard in hand, the kind of visit nobody remembers by lunchtime. He'd been standing near the flagpole, half listening, when Daniel's voice cracked across the yard like a whip. Ellis stopped walking. He didn't say anything at first. He just watched, the way Harmon's shoulders squared instead of collapsing, the way her eyes stayed fixed forward even as her chin trembled, the way 300 recruits held their breath together, waiting to see if she'd fold. She didn't fold. Ellis had spent 26 years in the Army. He'd seen discipline. He'd seen cruelty dressed up as discipline, too. And he knew the difference the way you know the difference between fire that warms and fire that burns. What he was witnessing wasn't training. It was a man enjoying his own power a little too much. The yard had gone unervingly quiet, that particular stillness of 100 people trying not to exist. Somewhere in the distance, a flag snapped once in the wind. A single boot shifted in the mud. And then Ellis walked forward, slow and unhurried, each step landing with a weight that made recruits straighten instinctively before he'd even said a word. "Sergeant Daniels," Ellis said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. A word. Daniels turned, and something in his face shifted, the swagger draining out of it in real time, replaced by the particular pallor of a man realizing he'd been overheard saying the thing he never should have said aloud. The two men stepped a few yards away, but the silence of the formation carried every syllable anyway. Ellis didn't raise his voice. He didn't need theatrics. He simply reminded Daniels, in a tone colder than the morning air, that breaking a soldier down to build them up was a craft, not a license for cruelty, and that mocking someone's tears was not leadership, it was cowardice wearing rank. Here is the question worth sitting with. Was Daniels wrong to push her hard? No. Pushing recruits past what they think they can survive is the entire point of what he does. It saves lives later, in places far worse than a training yard. But there's a line between forging someone and humiliating them. And once you cross it, you're not building a soldier anymore. You're just proving something about yourself. Ellis turned back to the formation. He walked straight to Harmon, stopped in front of her, and said, loud enough for every recruit to hear, that the mile she'd cried through was the same mile that broke stronger-looking men in half, and she'd finished it anyway. Then he told her something quieter, something only she could hear, something about his own first year, about the sergeant who once told him he'd never make it, and how wrong that man had been. For the first time since basic training began, Harmon let herself exhale. Because kindness doesn't vanish. It waits, and it finds its way back. The mud eventually dried on that field. The mockery didn't leave a mark that lasted. But somewhere in that silence, in the moment one commander chose to see a soldier instead of a target, something in Emily Harmon settled into place for good. The quiet, unshakable knowledge that she had always belonged there. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments what it stirred in you, and subscribe for more stories about the quiet courage that changes everything.